This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Before we join our featured guests, I got to mention, thank you for listening to America's Workforce for the second year in a row. We are the #1 union podcast in America. And I always say it's because of the great guests that we bring to the show. And right now, one of them is Lindsay Dougherty, or it's pronounced differently in Ireland. Okay, I'm gonna let you run down the different ways you pronounce your name. I'm starting with Dougherty, right?
Dougherty is how I, as an American, would pronounce it. But if you're in Ireland, it could be Dougherty. If you want to do the Gaelic version, it could be O'Dougherty, and it could be Dougherty in Boston and Philly, for that matter. Or Dougherty if you're far in California.
Okay. Well, I'm Ed Flash Ference. I've heard Ferenc, I heard Ferenc, I've heard everything, but I just go by Flash. So it's Lindsay and Flash today. And let's tell you a little about Lindsay. She is a proud second-generation Teamster who comes from Detroit. She's out in Hollywood right now. West Hollywood, is that right?
My office is in North Hollywood, but
North Hollywood. Okay. And she began her career in the motion picture industry as a transportation dispatcher. That was over 20 years ago. And I'll tell you, you have accomplished a lot here. Looking at your bio, for the last decade, she has fought on behalf of the Teamsters, behalf of Local 399 as a business agent, lead organizer, recording secretary, principal officer, division director for the motion picture and theatrical trade division of the Teamsters, working in film and TV. When do you sleep?
That's one of the things I try to do is sleep so I can keep going, but it is difficult these days.
So talk to me a little bit about your family, second generation Teams. Is that kind of what pushed you into this direction? Talk to me about that part first.
Yeah, 100%. Because I always say that I'm honored and privileged to be a second generation Teamster. My dad was a Teamster, still is. He's retired for about 10 years now. He started out in the late 70s as a warehouse forklift driver, and he worked his way up in the Teamsters. He was a secretary treasurer of Teamsters Local 337 in Detroit. And, so my entire life I've been under a Teamster healthcare plan because of my father. I was the first female in my family ever to go to college. And that was, in 2001, after being here for many, many years, coming from Ireland and Scotland. But I was raised within a union family and knew the importance. So I was able to go to college, and right out of college, I started working as a Teamster, as you mentioned, a transportation dispatcher in the motion picture industry in Detroit, which, not many people know. There's filming that happens not just in Hollywood, but other parts of the country and world. So that, like I said, I grew up with it. So I was around, the Labor Day parade, things like that. So labor has really been a key component of my life.
What's interesting, I've mentioned this on the show many, many times. There's so many, I think there's like 19, I might be wrong, maybe 18, 19 divisions in the Teamsters. And and I'm glad we're talking about this today because we have not done anything. I've mentioned them on the show, but as far as a guest to bring onto the show and talk about the motion picture and theatrical trade division, I think that's pretty significant. Maybe you can give us a little background on that, because I think that needs a little PR in itself. What do you think?
Yeah. So, Hollywood, as, what most people know as actors, celebrities, that kind of thing. When you see a movie, you're looking at actors that you normally see. But behind the camera and the ones that actually make the movie or make a motion picture or a television series, there's a whole crew that's comprised of many trade unionists, and all have a different craft, whether it's Teamsters that we represent drivers, casting directors, location professionals, which find the locations where you film production. We also have wranglers, so animals that are filmed. Our members either are wranglers for the livestock or animal trainers for a dog specifically. And we have other members that, like mechanics, servicemen, that kind of stuff. And then the rest of the crew, you have directors, you have costumers, makeup artists, all comprised of, again, trade unionists. So our industry is over 90% organized labor. So it's not just the actors. You have writers, additionally to what I've already mentioned. So everything happens with all of those parts and all of those people. It's not just the actors. So most people, you see what's in front of the camera, you see what's on the screen, but you don't see what it takes to make a production like that. But it's a lot of hard work from the crew.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts, no doubt about that. I was looking at some of the talking points today, and what I thought was interesting, if you could get into some details on this. This can't be an easy job. I understand you've been working to standardize contracts to keep the industry standard across the country. With what you just mentioned, how the heck do you standardize the contracts on that? That needs some explaining.
You learn how to be a good juggler in a circus. And that's pretty much what it is like, because you have hundreds of production companies. You have the major studios like Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, the studios that we've all, as regular moviegoers, have seen. But there's so many different production companies that are actually involved in making productions that you see on the screen. And they're traveling to all different parts of the country. They don't just film in Hollywood. They also film worldwide. So when a production company goes there's even filming happening in Ohio right now, in Cleveland. So like if there's a movie project that goes there, we try to get a similar contract that we may have in Hollywood or that we have in Atlanta, so that everybody's, they're doing the same job. So we're trying to standardize them to essentially look like a national agreement, similar to what the Teamsters have in other divisions, such as UPS or, sanitation or trucking. So that's what we're trying to do, so that people aren't being undermined or undercut their wages, because any employer will take advantage of their employees whenever possible. So that's what we try to prevent from happening for our members.
Yeah, I have seen a gradual shift of movie production out of California. You know that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm looking at New York, Atlanta, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oklahoma. In fact, last year, I'm sure you know this, they filmed a good part of the Superman movie in Cleveland for all the right reasons. Number one, well, we like to have it in Cleveland for the tax dollars and all that, but Superman was born in Cleveland on the east side, Jerry Siegel. In fact, his house is now a monument and all that. So I get that. But I'm wondering, is that part of saying, oh, California is too expensive? We got to move it into places where it's going to be easier for us to navigate through the wages and all that kind of stuff. And here you're trying to standardize those contracts. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say California, first and foremost, has always been expensive. And like coming from Detroit 20 years ago is more expensive. It's California. You're paying for the weather, so to speak. But I would say with the way that the industry has worked historically is that, productions will go film somewhere for, the very reason that you mentioned. Superman's from Cleveland. They want Cleveland. They want the look, the aesthetic. They actually want to see whether it's establishing shots. Washington, D.C. is filmed all the time, but only for Washington, D.C., the buildings, the establishing shots, the exteriors, that kind of stuff. Even where I come from, Detroit, there was, whoever would have thought there was filming happening in Detroit in the early 2000s, but there was. And it wasn't because of, which I'll talk about now, is tax credits, which really that's why you see more of this shift of production companies that are going to other places to film. Aside from California being expensive, they're going because of these tax incentives that the states have in various areas of the country. But this has been something that is not new to us in our industry, because we've seen this shift in the, I would say, global economy of our industry since the 1990s, when Canada first started offering federal, their Canadian tax incentives, which they give the production companies a tax break. And
Mm-hmm.
so, of course, when it comes down to money, which obviously every production company or studio has a bean counter that's saying, you know what, you can make this look like California if you go to New Mexico, or if you go here, you can, and especially if you're filming on a stage, it doesn't really matter where you're at then. But that's really what has driven productions outside of California into other states. And now we're seeing more so than ever before in other countries. There's over 100 different tax credit programs out there that all of the studios look at to film. So
Yeah.
that's the fight that we have in California and have had, like I said, since the 1990s.
Yeah, I know Ohio has that program as well, and they've been amping it up too. So, yeah, I'm glad we touched on that. You know what? I got to take a quick break. Lindsay Dougherty joining us on our live line today, one of many different pronunciations depending on where you live in the world. We're going to continue with her here on America's Workforce. We're going to talk about the state of the film and television industry, both nationally and globally. That and more right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. We always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Featured guest today is Lindsay Dougherty. She is a proud second-generation Teamster, comes from Detroit. She's in North Hollywood right now. We're talking about a certain division of the Teamsters, and they have many. She holds the position of division director for the motion picture and theatrical trade division, representing over 15,000 Teamsters that work in the film and television industry throughout the United States and Canada. I want to talk a little bit more about Canada and these other countries too, because we're doing tax incentives here, but then you got other countries that are trying to outdo the incentives, and that's hurting the motion picture and TV industry. Talk to me about this contraction. I guess it started a couple of years ago. I know streaming has changed a lot of things. Why don't you explain to our audience the state of the industry right now and how you're trying to keep some stability here when it comes to jobs and wages? I know that's a very difficult task.
It is. And right now, the state of the industry is not good. I mean, we've seen in the motion picture industry throughout the last 100 years, there's been changes that have impacted workers. And those are primarily technological changes. And so in our modern day society, the big technological change we've seen is obviously the shift from how consumers view media or television or, motion pictures, which it formerly was mostly on television. And then the shift went to streaming through primarily Netflix, which started this. And that was really the shift happened when Netflix moved from DVD sales or, rentals, and then shifted to where you can actually stream on the internet. And so to speak, that's like the cord cutting that you may hear in the media. But once Netflix created House of Cards, that's what really changed this, because they started producing their own content and keeping their library on their platform, which then created this extreme competitiveness within the other studio systems. So these streamers come in, whether it's Netflix, it's Apple, Amazon now, and we have seen where now the studios had to basically change their whole way of doing business, and a lot of their business depends on advertising. And with streaming, the big sell for consumers was there's no advertising. And then also, some will argue that it's predatory pricing, where Netflix would charge such a small amount to lure subscribers. And then, the way that success was viewed, and this is like not that long ago, we're talking like 5 years ago, success was viewed as how many subscribers you have. And Netflix obviously blew everybody out of the water. They're a global enterprise, and they have the most amount of subscribers. on their platform. And so, I've been around long enough to see where the studios had to shift from being studios to then now they have their own streaming platforms. You see Universal has Peacock, Disney has Disney Plus now, Hulu is also Disney. So they had to create this entirely different business model. And so the competitive nature was, let's get as much content on our platforms to get the most amount of subscribers, and let's spend all the money in the world that we don't have. And then when Wall Street got a hold of that, well, there was a dip in Netflix's subscriber numbers. And now success really isn't based on your subscriber number. It's based on revenue and sales and profits. So the big shift has been now the contraction is really the streaming bubble has popped. There's still obviously competition between all of these companies, but they're not spending as much money. And during this time, the contraction began before the writer's strike and then the SAG-AFTRA strike, which then now has put us into the worst point of the contraction, where the companies, not only are they not spending as much money, but now they're seeing where can we get the most bang for our buck. And that's where the tax credit or the tax incentives come into play, because the driving force is money, which has always been in our industry. And so really that's where we're seeing the more work shift to other countries because of these tax incentives during a time in which there's contraction, which is why the levels of production right now are at its lowest.
Now, you mentioned the UK. Are there other countries on that list where you're seeing, this motion picture production going?
Yeah, I mean, dozens upon dozens. You have like Romania, you have obviously Canada, there's Australia, there's New Zealand. I mean, Malta, Spain, Italy, France, you name it. They all have it. And because they see the value of it, because it not only brings money or, to their economy, but also like you see a project like Game of Thrones, people go to visit where they filmed Game of Thrones in Spain and in Ireland now.
Yeah.
We're at a point now where it's not just for the aesthetics. They're going to Ireland to film American game shows with American actors, where you think that the game show is filmed somewhere in California and it's actually been filmed in Dublin, Ireland.
Now, I have to ask you this. The climate right now in Washington, it's, bring those jobs back. And, what's happening here is just the opposite. And you know as well as I mean, we have seen so many good paying jobs in this country. NAFTA, PNTR, gone. I mean, they're gone. They're not coming back. They're trying to bring some back with these chip plants and all that. But we're seeing the same thing happen here. Now, my question to you, is there any kind of movement legislatively to say, stop this madness right now?
Absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned on the state level, there obviously has been this fight that we've had in California for decades now, because our program does have to be modernized and changed. But the other discussion that we're also having on the federal side is federal legislation that brings a federal incentive into fruition, because that's what we really need, because these state tax credits they're not meant to compete with the UK. They're not meant to compete with these other countries. So we are actually, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters right now is working with the Trump administration on how we can get this done as soon as possible. Because, when you talk about bringing jobs back, it's a very easy fix in our industry specifically. We don't have to build manufacturing plants. We already have the workforce and we already have the infrastructure everywhere in the United States, most certainly in Los Angeles, which, has always been known as the film entertainment capital of the world. But we have, right now we have empty stages. And that can be said nationally. So we have an opportunity to really do this right now, which is what we're actively working on right now as well.
Now, I know you work with a lot of unions, the Writers Guild, my union, SAG-AFTRA. I see LIUNA. LIUNA's our presenting a sponsor here on the show. Are we all in this together on this fight? Are we have a lot of solidarity right now? I would imagine so, because we're talking about everybody's job at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, because, especially like post writers and actors strike, like the unions really came together during that time. And so we have stuck together, as sometimes it's painful because we all have difference of opinions all the time. But we have been doing this, working collaboratively with a coalition, and we're doing that on the federal side as well. I will say, some of the unions aren't set up nationally like we are. So we're definitely utilizing the Teamster power that we have to get this done.
I see you're working with John Voight on this. Can you tell me about that and how we were able to get that together? And celebrity helps. You know that.
Yeah, I mean, SAG-AFTRA definitely has their star power, but he not only has, obviously he's John Voight, but he has a relationship with President Trump, which is why he was tapped as being one of the special ambassadors to Hollywood. But he cares deeply about this industry and wants to see it grow and be what it once was. And I think especially him being, in California and seeing what's happened here, specifically in Los Angeles, it's very jarring to see how Hollywood once was and what it is now. And for me, being from Detroit, seeing what happens with the auto industry there, like we're looking at the same thing here.
Right.
That's what we're trying to really fight this. And so with Mr. Voight, he has had, he met with President Trump less than a month ago to talk about the plan, the Hollywood initiative, and really not just Hollywood, California, but to bring jobs back to the United States for American workers. So he's very much in the fight, and he has his whole team that we talk to them pretty consistently still to try and see this through.
Did he offer any comments on that meeting? Is there a next step planned here? Just wondering. I mean, you're meeting with the president. That could be very dynamic. You know that.
Yes. No. I mean, so right now there is an opportunity to possibly get federal legislation through the reconciliation bill that you hear about all the time. And so that's the goal, to get a federal legislation immediately, because it is very much past due, I will say. And we're doing that on the state side as well. So we've been talking to Mr. Voight about that still. And then obviously, there's other things that we can make tweaks to not just get funding for this legislation, but also, because really it's tax, it's a tax rebate, but also to modernize our programs to make it extremely competitive, if not even more competitive, because the longer that we wait and the more time that we allow for these other countries to build infrastructure and a workforce, the more in trouble we're going to be. We need to really just nip it in the bud. It's already gone it's gone too far already. And so really that's why it's a very urgent matter for our industry right now to get this done. So we're actively working with them. I mean, we have meetings daily about this to try and get it done.
Well, I'll keep an eye on the Teamster website. And, Lindsay, that's what this show's all about. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people come to the table to educate our listeners on these issues because they don't know about them. Media is so convoluted today, that, and it's so fragmented. So it's important. This show is all about the working class. It's all about unions. We're talking about protecting union jobs. That's what it's all about. You know that. You grew up in a union family. We want to make sure that those jobs stay here. Well, I'm going to leave it on that note. You take care. Please stay in touch with us. Teamsters are sponsors here on America's Workforce. We appreciate what Teamsters do in so many different ways, all the different divisions. And I'm glad we finally featured this one division. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Flash. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.